Dr. Elara Voss stood in the dim light of her university office, surrounded by ancient texts and fragments of pottery bearing symbols no modern linguist had deciphered. For 15 years, she had pursued what most of her colleagues considered a fool's errand: the search for the truth behind the myth of the sleepers. On her wall hung a single image, a photograph of an ancient cave painting discovered in southern Turkey. It depicted humanoid figures in meditative poses, their bodies emanating strange wave-like patterns. Around them, primitive humans bowed in reverence or fear. The image had haunted Elara since she first saw it as a graduate student. The dating placed it at approximately 12,000 years old, yet the artistry and detail were unlike anything from that period. More troubling were the identical symbols she later found in sites across the globe, from Göbekli to underwater structures off Japan, from Amazonian cave systems to chambers beneath the Sahara. All pointed to the same phenomenon: the sleepers. Elara's communicator chimed, breaking her concentration. Professor Voss came the voice of her research assistant, Maya Indrani. The carbon dating results from the Ethiopia site just arrived. Elara's heart raced, and the chamber dates to 14,500 BCE, but Maya hesitated. The organic material found within the sarcophagus is problematic. How so? The DNA structure doesn't match anything in our database, human or otherwise. And there's something else: the cellular decay suggests these remains were in a state of suspended animation, not death, possibly for thousands of years before the chamber was abandoned. Elara stared at the ancient painting on her wall. Send me everything, and Maya tell no one else about this. Throughout human history, stories had persisted of beings with extraordinary abilities who were neither gods nor ordinary humans. The Nephilim of biblical texts, the Apkallu of Mesopotamia, the Tuatha Danann of Celtic lore beings who walked among early humans, teaching, guiding, and sometimes ruling. In nearly every culture, these entities eventually disappeared, going to sleep within the earth, returning to the stars, or withdrawing into hidden realms to await a time of awakening. Most historians dismiss these as creation myths or attempts to explain natural phenomena. Elara saw patterns too consistent to ignore. The similarities in these stories spanned cultures that had no known contact. The sleepers appeared in humanity's earliest records, described as guardians who would return in humanity's darkest hour. What if they weren't myths at all? Global interest in the sleepers had surged 6 months ago when the Atacama event occurred. A massive earthquake in Chile's Atacama Desert revealed a previously unknown structure 200 meters beneath the surface. Initial explorations found a chamber lined with an unknown metal alloy containing properties that defied current scientific understanding. Inside were 20 stone containers shaped like human sarcophagi, all empty. On the walls, inscriptions matched those found at other sites across the world. For the first time, mainstream archaeologists could not dismiss the connection. Something or someone had created identical structures on different continents thousands of years before humans supposedly developed ocean-going vessels or complex architectural knowledge. Elara had been called to the site as one of the few scholars who had studied these symbols extensively. What she found changed everything she thought she knew. The inscriptions weren't just symbolic, they were a language, one that operated on principles unlike any human communication system. After months of work, she had deciphered fragments suggesting the sleepers were not gods or aliens, but humans who had developed abilities beyond normal physical limitations. Yes. According to the texts, these individuals had undergone a transformation, activating dormant aspects of human genetic potential. They had developed extraordinary lifespans, heightened cognitive abilities, and powers that primitive humans interpreted as divine. Most intriguing was the suggestion that this potential lay dormant in all humans, awaiting activation. But the texts also spoke of a threat, a cosmic danger that would eventually find Earth. The sleepers had prepared humanity as best they could before entering a state of suspended animation, their consciousness preserved while their physical forms rested in hidden chambers across the globe. They would awaken when needed, either through predetermined triggers or when called forth by those who knew the methods. Dr. Mikhail Novak, director of the Global Archaeological Council, had dismissed Elara's translations. Your interpretation conveniently supports your existing theories, Dr. Voss. These are likely just religious texts from a previously unknown cult, nothing more. But privately, certain governments had taken notice. Research into the symbols and structures accelerated, conducted behind the closed doors of military installations rather than university halls. Elara knew why. If the sleepers existed, if their abilities could be understood and replicated, they represented the greatest strategic advantage in human history. But she also understood the warnings in the ancient text's power without wisdom would lead to destruction. The sleepers had not been weapons. They had been guardians, teachers who understood that humanity needed to evolve spiritually before it could safely wield greater power. Maya's voice interrupted Elara's thoughts again. Professor, there's something else. The satellite imaging from the Arctic site shows thermal anomalies consistent with the patterns we observed in Ethiopia and Chile. I think we found another chamber, and this one appears to be active. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. For centuries, the chambers had been empty or dormant. If one was showing signs of activity now, it could mean only one thing. The sleepers were beginning to awaken. Captain Sarah Reeves of United Nations Special Operations stood in the observation room, watching the excavation of the Arctic chamber through reinforced glass. Unlike previous sites, this one had been found under military control from the beginning. No academic announcements, no press briefings, just a quiet operation conducted under the cover of a climate research station. How long until we can access the central chamber? She asked the chief engineer. The outer door is unlike anything we've encountered, he replied. The material appears simple, some kind of stone, but it's resisting all our cutting tools. And there's an energy signature emanating from inside, interfering with our electronic equipment. Sarah had been selected for this assignment because of her background in both military operations and ancient languages. She had studied under Dr. Voss briefly before being recruited by military intelligence. She understood enough about the sleepers to know that whoever controlled them or their knowledge would reshape the global balance of power. What about the inscriptions? Have the linguists made any progress? The engineer handed her a tablet. They say it's a warning or possibly instructions. Dr. Ivanov believes it describes a specific mental state required to open the door. Sarah studied the symbols. Unlike machine-carved precision or the irregular hand-carving of ancient artisans, these markings appeared perfect yet organic, as if grown rather than made. They seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles, revealing deeper layers of meaning. She recognized elements from Elara's translations. The central symbol represented awakening or activation. The surrounding patterns described a method not physical tools but mental states, brainwave patterns that resonated with the door itself. "Get me Dr. Voss," Sarah ordered, "now." "Ma'am, the Oversight Committee hasn't authorized civilian involvement in this phase." Sarah fixed him with a hard stare. "This isn't a conventional archaeological site, and those aren't conventional locks. Dr. Voss has spent her career studying these symbols. If there's anyone who can understand what we're dealing with, it's her." 12 hours later, Elara stood before the chamber door, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "You shouldn't have brought me here," she said quietly to Sarah. "This isn't just another ancient site. If I'm right about what's inside, you're not prepared for the consequences." "That's exactly why we need you," Sarah replied. "Every major power is searching for these chambers now. The Chinese found one in the Kunlun Mountains last month. The Russians have been excavating in Siberia since the Atacama discovery. We need to understand what we're dealing with before someone activates something they can't control." Elara placed her hand on the surface of the door. Unlike the stone around it, it was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate at a frequency just below human hearing. The text described the sleepers as guardians, not weapons. They developed these abilities to protect humanity from a threat they foresaw in our future. What threat? The translations aren't clear. They describe it as the great darkness between stars and the hunger that devours worlds. Whatever it was, it frightened beings powerful enough to manipulate matter with thought alone. Sarah lowered her voice. 4 days ago, our deep space monitoring station detected an anomaly at the edge of the solar system. a gravitational distortion that doesn't match any known phenomenon. Three similar anomalies have been recorded in the past month, each closer to Earth than the last. Elara's eyes widened. You think it's connected to the sleeper's awakening? I think we need to understand what's in that chamber. If there's a threat coming and the sleepers knew about it thousands of years ago, we need their knowledge. Elara studied the inscriptions again. According to these, the door will open for those who approach with specific intentions. And not just anyone can enter, only those who seek knowledge for protection, not domination. That sounds conveniently subjective, Sarah commented. Maybe to us, but remember, if the texts are accurate, the sleepers could perceive human thought patterns directly. This isn't a mechanical lock, it's a psychic one. Around them, military personnel continued their work, setting up equipment and running tests on the structure. Elara knew they were wasting their time. The chamber wouldn't yield to technology alone. I need everyone to leave, she announced suddenly. The site commander stepped forward. That's not happening, Dr. Voss. This is a secure military operation. Then your operation will fail, Elara replied calmly. The door is designed to respond to specific mental states. The presence of people with aggressive or controlling intentions will keep it sealed. Sarah considered this. Give us the room, she finally ordered. Clear all personnel to the outer perimeter. Captain Reeves, I must object. That's an order, Commander. Clear the room. Reluctantly, the team began to withdraw. When only Sarah and Elara remained, Elara sat cross-legged before the door, her posture reminiscent of the figures in the ancient painting that hung in her office. What are you doing? Sarah asked. The inscriptions describe a state of receptive awareness. Not forcing, not demanding, but opening oneself to connection. Elara closed her eyes. I've spent years studying meditation techniques from cultures connected to the sleeper sites. If anyone can achieve the necessary mental state, I can. And if something dangerous emerges, Elara opened her eyes briefly. The sleepers protected humanity once. I have to believe they still will. She closed her eyes again and began to regulate her breathing. Minutes passed in silence. Sarah watched as Elara's expression gradually shifted, tension melting away, replaced by a profound stillness. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, charged with an energy Sarah couldn't name but could definitely feel. Without warning, lines appeared on the door's surface, glowing with a soft blue light. They traced patterns similar to the inscriptions but more complex, flowing like circuits through the stone. The vibration increased, now audible, as a low hum that resonated in Sarah's chest. The stone began to shift, not breaking or sliding aside, but transforming, particles reorganizing themselves into a new configuration. Where a solid wall had stood moments before, an opening now appeared, revealing a passage that descended deeper into the earth. Elara opened her eyes, which reflected the blue light emanating from the doorway. It worked, she whispered. What now? Sarah asked, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. Now we meet the past, Elara said, rising to her feet, and possibly humanity's future. The passageway descended at a gentle angle, its walls covered in flowing symbols that emitted the same soft blue light as the door. Unlike the rough-hewn tunnels of ancient tombs, this passage was perfectly smooth, as if molded rather than carved. The air inside was surprisingly fresh, suggesting some form of ventilation system that had functioned for millennia. The construction technology alone is beyond anything we know from ancient civilizations, Elara observed as they walked. No seams, no tool marks, just continuous material shaped with perfect precision. Sarah remained silent, her military training keeping her alert for any threat. She had ordered a small security team to follow at a distance, but Elara had warned that aggressive intentions might trigger defensive measures within the chamber. After descending for nearly 100 meters, the passage opened into a vast circular chamber. The ceiling arched high above them, and at its center, a sphere of blue-white light hovered, illuminating the entire space. Around the perimeter stood 20 pedestals, each supporting what appeared to be a crystal sarcophagus. Unlike the empty containers found at other sites, these held humanoid figures. The sleepers, Elara breathed, approaching the nearest container. Inside lay a man who appeared to be in his prime, perhaps 40 years old. His features were striking: high cheekbones, strong jawline, skin with a golden hue. He wore simple garments of an unknown material that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. Most remarkable was that he showed no signs of decay. He might have been sleeping rather than preserved for thousands of years. Are they dead? Sarah asked, studying the figure. Not according to the texts, Elara replied. They're in a state of suspended animation, their consciousness existing on another plane while their bodies remain here, preserved until needed. As they moved deeper into the chamber, the light from the central sphere intensified, pulsing in a rhythm that felt strangely familiar, almost like a heartbeat. Elara realized it matched her own pulse, which had slowed during her meditative state. The system is responsive, she said. It's synchronizing with our biological rhythms. At the center of the chamber stood an elevated platform with what appeared to be a control system, not mechanical switches or buttons, but crystalline structures arranged in patterns similar to the inscriptions. Elara approached it cautiously. The text referred to this as the awakening key, she explained. It's described as a nexus point where a properly prepared mind can interact with the sleeper's consciousness. Interact how? Sarah asked, studying the chamber with increasing concern. The technology here was far beyond anything in the historical record. If it had existed thousands of years ago, then everything they thought they knew about human history was wrong. Before Elara could answer, the central sphere pulsed more intensely, and a voice spoke not in sound waves that vibrated the air, but directly in their minds. You have come seeking the sleepers. The voice was neither male nor female, old nor young. It carried a quality of timelessness that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Elara stepped forward. Yes, are you one of them? I am the guardian interface, created to evaluate those who seek awakening. For 12,000 years, I have maintained this chamber, waiting for the signs of necessity. What signs? Sarah asked. The approaching darkness, the hunger between stars. It comes now, as was foreseen. Elara and Sarah exchanged glances. The anomalies in the outer solar system, Sarah murmured. You are military, the voice observed, addressing Sarah. You seek power to protect, but also to dominate. This duality exists in all humans, but the balance determines worthiness. Sarah stiffened. Worthiness. I'm here to protect my people from threats. If that's domination, so be it. Honesty, the voice acknowledged. This is valuable. The entity's attention seemed to shift to Elara. You have studied us for much of your life. You seek understanding rather than power. This balance is favorable. We need to know what threat is coming, Elara said, and how the sleepers intended to help humanity face it. The sphere pulsed again, and the chamber filled with a three-dimensional projection, stars and planets, galaxies spinning in the void. At the edge of a familiar spiral galaxy, the Milky Way, a darkness moved, not like a planet or star, but like something alive, reaching tendrils toward the spiral arms. It has consumed a dozen civilizations across the cosmos. It feeds on consciousness, on potential. Your world has grown bright with the light of billions of minds. It has noticed. What is it? Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We have no name for it in your language. It exists partially in your dimension and partially beyond. Your sciences cannot detect it directly, only its effects on space-time. We encountered it long ago when humanity was young. We sacrificed much to turn it away, but knew it would return. The projection shifted, showing Earth thousands of years in the past. Structures appeared across the planet, the chambers they had been discovering, connected by lines of energy that formed a global network. We created defenses. We cultivated potential within the human genome. We began the great work preparing humanity to defend itself when we could no longer intervene directly. Why couldn't you intervene? Sarah asked. Why go to sleep? The powers we developed came at a cost. Extended use damaged the connection between consciousness and physical form. We could not remain awake and retain our abilities. So we created the chambers, places where we could rest while our consciousness worked on other planes, guiding human development subtly through dreams and intuition. Elara's mind raced, connecting threads from myths and legends across culture, stories of dream messengers, spiritual guides who appeared to shamans and priests throughout history. You've been influencing human development all along, guiding, not controlling. The potential had to develop naturally or it would be unstable. The great work required millennia of careful cultivation. What exactly is this potential? Sarah pressed. What abilities did the sleepers develop? The sphere dimmed slightly, as if the entity was considering how much to reveal. The full activation of human neural capacity, control over matter and energy through focused consciousness, perception beyond the five physical senses, communication across vast distances without technology, the ability to defend mind and spirit against external influence or attack. Game. Sounds like science fiction, Sarah said skeptically. All advances appear as magic to those who do not understand them, the voice replied. Your own civilization has moved from steam engines to quantum computing in a few centuries. The leap from your current neuroscience to what we achieved is no greater. Elara stepped closer to the crystal sarcophagi, and these abilities, they exist as potential in all humans to varying degrees. Some have greater natural capacity than others, but all can develop beyond your current limitations. The sleepers were simply the first to fully manifest these abilities through dedicated practice and certain catalysts. What catalysts? Sarah asked sharply. That knowledge is not for those who would weaponize it, the voice replied. The abilities themselves are neutral, but their application determines their nature. In the wrong hands, they become destructive rather than protective. Sarah frowned but didn't press further. The implications were already overwhelming. If humans could truly develop these abilities, it would transform every aspect of civilization, medicine, technology, warfare, communication. You said the threat is approaching now, Elara said. Is that why this chamber has become active while others remain dormant? Yes, the network of chambers responds to certain cosmic frequencies. As the entity approaches, the chambers prepare for reactivation. This one has remained most intact, so it awakens first. And the sleepers. Elara gestured to the crystal sarcophagi. Will they awaken too? That depends on necessity and worthiness. Their awakening requires significant energy and purpose. If humanity can face the coming threat with its own developed potential, full awakening may not be necessary. Sarah stepped forward. How long do we have before this threat reaches Earth? The projection shifted again, showing the solar system. The darkness moved slowly but inexorably inward from beyond Pluto's orbit. At current velocity, approximately 1 Earth year before first contact. But its influence begins sooner. Disruptions in thought patterns, increased conflict, deterioration of cooperation. It weakens resistance before feeding. That could explain the recent increase in global tensions, Sarah murmured. Several previously stable regions had erupted into conflict over the past months, often for reasons that seemed disproportionate to the violence that followed. The entity's approach affects sensitive minds first, amplifying fear and aggression. This creates division that makes collective defense impossible. How do we stop it? Elara asked. There are 3 paths. First, awakening the sleepers fully to lead humanity's defense. Second, accelerating the development of humanity's latent abilities to create a collective shield. Third, activating the global network of chambers to generate a planetary barrier. Which would be most effective? Sarah demanded. Each has advantages and risks. The sleepers are most powerful but fewest in number. Human potential is widespread but untested. The chamber network is designed for this purpose but requires specific activation protocols that may have been lost over time. Elara considered this information carefully. You mentioned that the sleepers guide through dreams and intuition. Is that happening now? Yes. As the threat approaches, the sleeper's consciousness becomes more active. Those with receptive minds may experience unusual dreams, sudden insights, or compulsions to visit certain locations. The archaeological discoveries, Elara realized, people being drawn to investigate these sites just as the threat approaches, that's not coincidence. Correct. The awakening process has already begun, but it faces resistance from those who fear change or seek to control power for themselves. Sarah paced the chamber, processing the implications. My superiors will want access to this technology, to the abilities you've described. They'll see it as a military asset. Which is precisely why full access has not been granted, the voice replied. The chambers respond to intention, and those seeking power for domination activate defense mechanisms, not knowledge repositories. Is that why some chambers were found empty? Elara asked. Because they were approached with the wrong intention. The sarcophagi were removed to safer locations when the chambers detected potential misuse. The network is self-preserving. This explained the empty chambers in Atacama and other sites. The sleepers had designed their resting places with sophisticated security that operated on levels beyond physical barriers. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. "You've shown us the threat and told us about these abilities, but how exactly do we proceed?" The central sphere pulsed more intensely, and the nearest crystal sarcophagus began to glow. "Direct communication is required. You will speak with one who can guide the initial preparations." The crystal covering of the sarcophagus became transparent, then seemed to dissolve completely. The figure inside, a woman with striking features and dark hair streaked with silver, opened her eyes. Unlike the vacant stare of someone waking from ordinary sleep, her gaze was immediately alert and aware. She sat up smoothly, her movements fluid despite thousands of years of physical inactivity. When she spoke, her voice was clear and resonant, with an accent Elara couldn't place. "I am Neva, third guardian of the Eastern Threshold," she said, "and you are the ones we have awaited." Neva stood before them, her presence filling the chamber with an energy that made the air seem to vibrate. Though she appeared human, there was something fundamentally different about her, a quality of awareness that felt deeper and more expansive than ordinary consciousness. "You have questions," she said, her eyes moving between Elara and Sarah. "Many questions. I sense your confusion, your fear, and your hope." "You can read our minds?" Sarah asked warily. "Not thoughts in their formed state, but emotional patterns, intention, the shape of your consciousness," Neva explained. "It is not intrusion but perception, like seeing color where others might see only light and shadow." Elara stepped forward. "You've been asleep for thousands of years. How can you be so coherent?" Neva smiled slightly. "My body rested, my consciousness did not. While in stasis, we exist partially in other dimensions where time flows differently. I have been active, observing human development, occasionally guiding when possible through dreams and inspiration. I know your modern languages, your technologies, your conflicts and achievements." "Then you know what's happening now," Sarah said. "These anomalies at the edge of the solar system." Neva's expression grew solemn. "Yes, the Devourer approaches. We encountered it long ago when humanity was still learning to create permanent settlements. It was drawn to the first flickerings of collective consciousness as humans began to form larger communities." "What exactly is it?" Elara asked. "An entity that evolved in the spaces between dimensions. It feeds on consciousness, particularly the energy generated by sentient minds working in harmony. Planets with developing civilizations are its preferred hunting grounds. Like Earth," Sarah said grimly. "Yes. When we first encountered it, humanity was too fragmented, too undeveloped to defend itself. We, those you call the sleepers, had already begun developing abilities beyond ordinary human limits. We used these powers to create a barrier that diverted the Devourer away from this solar system." "At what cost?" Elara asked, noting the sadness that flickered across Neva's face. "Half our number burned out their connection to physical form. Their consciousness persisted but could no longer inhabit their bodies. The rest of us were severely weakened, requiring the stasis chambers to recover." Sarah frowned. "If it took such sacrifice when humanity was small and undeveloped, what chance do we have now that we're a much bigger target?" "That is why we began the great work," Neva replied. "For 12,000 years, we have been subtly guiding human development, encouraging the evolution of capabilities that would prepare you for this moment. The potential that exists in humanity now is vastly greater than what we alone possessed." She moved to the center of the chamber, and the hovering sphere responded to her presence, expanding to create a three-dimensional display of the Earth. Points of light appeared across the globe, some brighter than others, but all connected by fine threads of energy. Each light represents a human whose natural abilities are beginning to manifest. Some are already aware of their capabilities, though they may not understand their true nature. Others remain unaware, but have experienced moments of inexplicable insight, unusual dreams, or seemingly impossible coincidences. "How many?" Elara asked, staring at the thousands of lights scattered across the continents. "Approximately 1 in 10,000 humans has significant natural potential. 1 in 100,000 has begun spontaneous development. With proper guidance, these numbers could increase dramatically." Sarah studied the display, noting the distribution patterns. "They're everywhere, across every nation and culture." "Of course," Neva said. "The potential is inherent to humanity. not to any specific genetic lineage. It manifests wherever conditions allow, though cultural contexts affect how it is interpreted and developed. Elara's mind raced through historical accounts of individuals with seemingly impossible abilities, yogis who could control their body temperature in freezing conditions, shamans who diagnosed illnesses without modern technology. Individuals with unexplained healing capabilities or moments of perfect precognition. These abilities have been appearing throughout human history, she realized. But they've been categorized as spiritual phenomena, paranormal events, or simply dismissed as superstition. Yes, Neva confirmed. Your modern civilization, with its emphasis on technology and material science, has created a blind spot regarding consciousness-based abilities. This was not always the case. Ancient cultures often had sophisticated understanding of these potentials, though they described them in terms that modern science doesn't recognize. What exactly can these abilities do? Sarah asked, her military mind already assessing strategic applications. The Guardian interface mentioned control over matter and energy, enhanced perception, communication across distances. Those are broad categories, Neve explained. The specific manifestations vary. Some can perceive energy fields invisible to ordinary senses. Others can influence physical systems through focused intention. Some develop heightened empathic perception or the ability to communicate non-verbally. The most advanced can affect the fundamental relationship between consciousness and matter. She gestured, and a small object on the nearby pedestal, something like a crystalline disc, rose into the air, floating toward her hand without being touched. Telekinesis, Sarah whispered. That term oversimplifies the process, Neva said. I'm not moving the object with my mind. I'm altering my perception of separation between my consciousness and the object's energy state. Once that perceptual barrier dissolves, influencing its position becomes natural, like moving a limb. The disk rotated in the air, then transformed its molecular structure, rearranging into a different configuration before returning to its original form. Such abilities seem impossible by the laws of physics as we understand them, Elara said. Your physics is incomplete, Neva replied simply. It describes the behavior of matter and energy beautifully, but has only begun to explore the role of consciousness as a fundamental force. The observer effect in quantum mechanics hints at this relationship, but your sciences have barely scratched the surface. Sarah's expression hardened. If these abilities exist as potential in humans, why haven't they become more widespread naturally? Why would we need your guidance? Because development requires specific conditions, Neva explained. Menial disciplines that most modern humans never practice. Environmental factors that modern lifestyles disrupt, and, perhaps most importantly, belief systems that allow for these possibilities. Your civilization has created a consensus reality that effectively blocks many of these abilities from manifesting. Consensus reality? Elara questioned. The collective beliefs and expectations that shape how humans perceive and interact with the world. When a civilization collectively believes something is impossible, it creates psychic resistance that makes manifestation more difficult. Only those with exceptional natural talent or specific training can overcome this resistance. Elara thought about the implications. So to prepare humanity for this threat, we need to change not just individual capabilities but collective beliefs about what's possible. Precisely, Neva agreed. This is why we've waited until necessity forced the issue. Humanity needed to develop material science, technology, social structures, and global communication systems before these revelations could be properly integrated. And now we have 1 year before this devourer arrives, Sarah said. How do we proceed? What's the plan? Neva moved toward the chamber's center. The defense will have multiple phases. First, awakening those with active potential and accelerating their development. Second, activating the global network of chambers to create a planetary shield. Third, preparing for direct confrontation if the shield proves insufficient. How do we identify those with active potential? Sarah asked. Your display showed thousands scattered across the planet. They are already being drawn to specific locations, places where the chamber network connects to the surface. As the devourer approaches, these sites emit energy signatures that resonate with developed consciousness. Those with active abilities feel compelled to visit these locations, though they may not understand why. Elara's expression changed as realization dawned. The archaeological discoveries they're happening now because people with these developing abilities are being unconsciously drawn to the sites. Yes, Neva confirmed. I believe you were one such person, Dr. Voss. Your lifelong fascination with the sleepers was not random academic interest, but response to a deeper calling. Elara felt a chill run through her. Her entire career suddenly appeared in a new light, not just scholarly pursuit, but preparation for this moment. What about government's military forces? Sarah asked. They're already investigating these sites, trying to secure whatever advantages they can find. This is expected, but problematic, Neva acknowledged. The chamber network responds to intention. Those seeking power for domination will activate defense mechanisms, not knowledge. This is why many chambers were found empty. The sarcophagi relocated themselves when approached with improper intention. Relocated? How? Sarah demanded. The chambers are connected through dimensional interfaces that allow matter transfer under specific conditions. When threatened, the system moves critical components to secure locations. Tour. This explained another mystery: how identical structures appeared across continents without evidence of the technology needed to build them. The builders hadn't traveled physically. They'd used some form of matter transmission system that operated on principles modern physics didn't yet understand. We need to coordinate these individuals with potential, Elara said. Bring them together. Help them understand what's happening to them. Yes, Neva agreed. And quickly, as the Devourer approaches, its influence will begin affecting global consciousness. Fear, aggression, and division will increase as it attempts to disrupt humanity's capacity for unified response. That may already be happening, Sarah noted grimly. Global tensions have been escalating without clear cause. Conflicts erupting over minor disputes. It's been concerning our intelligence analysts for months. Then we must move faster, Neva said. I will awaken the other sleepers in this chamber. Each will take responsibility for a different region, gathering those with active abilities and beginning their training. What about defensive capabilities? Sarah asked. Military forces will want countermeasures they can deploy if your consciousness-based approach fails. The technology in these chambers can be adapted for defensive purposes, Neva conceded, but its effectiveness depends on the operator's mental state. Weapons driven by fear are inherently limited against a consciousness-based threat. She turned to face them both directly. You each have crucial roles to play. Dr. Voss, you understand both the ancient knowledge and the modern academic world. You must bridge these domains, helping people conceptualize what is happening without dismissing it as superstition or science fiction. Neva then looked at Sarah. Captain Reeves, you understand security and strategic coordination. You must help create protected spaces where development can occur without interference from those who would weaponize these abilities. You must also prepare conventional forces for the possibility that they will face unconventional threats. What about you and the other sleepers? Elara asked. We will serve as teachers and coordinators, but our numbers are too few to face the Devourer directly. Our role is to catalyze humanity's latent potential, not to fight the battle for you. This threat must be met by humanity as it exists.